come to save the day.
Welcome to Mighty House. This is a radio show for people with problems, home improvement problems, that is, and for people who want common sense guidance on how to build green and live a more sustainable lifestyle. Send an email. The Mighty House crew is on the job. This is Mighty House.
All right, we're back, and today we've got something a little interesting, a little different from our norm. I was watching Rich. We did a video, about a year ago, where you made a live edge table top.
That was a countertop for my house. Yeah.
So then I had this 10-foot plank of walnut sitting in the back shop that a client canceled the job on, couldn't return the slab. So I thought, I'm going to follow Rich's lead here, and I'm going to go ahead and make a table for my daughter's condo because she needed a kitchen table. So that's how this all evolved. And so we'll just kind of show you the process of how we went through this and assembled the whole thing and got it going. Before we do that, before we get started, let's click on the bell, and then we'll also click on the little subscribe button, and we'll notify you the next time we get something else put up there. So here we go. So to get started, called a buddy of mine. He said, I got this great new CNC machine. You got to come check it out. I said, I got one better. I got some lumber that I want you to cut up. Can we make a table out of this and straighten it all out? Because it was all rough sawn cut and it needed to be leveled and straightened. And then also the thickness of it was uneven.
All over the place.
Right. Because the original piece was 10 feet long or so. So I cut it in half. I had these two pieces of 60-inch wide by 20-inch or so, 18 to 20 inches wide, live edge piece of walnut. So you can see here, we ran it back and forth on the CNC machine. We straightened it, we leveled it, and then we also ensured that from the first piece to the second piece that I had the same thickness. So that way the thickness tolerances were right on the money when we did this. And this CNC machine with the router also did a good job of, getting through the knot holes and stuff. Because the other option, what's the other option is you make the rails, right? With the
I use aluminum rails, and you can make any kind of float, and you go across it back and forth across with your router, but it requires quite a bit of leveling and shimming and clamping to make sure everything stays. So having access to a CNC like that's unless you know somebody with a 50-inch wide drum sander or a joiner or a planer rather that's that wide.
Right. So a big shout out to my buddy Carl at EBC Cabinet Solutions, and you can check him out at ebccabinetsolutions.com. If you want him to cut something, he can. You got a plan, the stuff that you're doing out, the carvings, he can whip that stuff out in a CNC machine. It comes out really good. So
I know, but there's something to be said about doing it by hand.
Oh
yeah. So it gives me something to do while I'm sitting there getting suntan.
Exactly. So I see
you're doweling the two slabs together.
Correct. So I ran each side. I ran that down with my track saw, straightened it out, and then you saw I just took one quick shot with the planer just to finish it off, and it married up really good. So I left all the knot holes, and then you can see that one chunk I left out, just so that it would have something to fill with the finish that we were putting on it.
Right.
Clamped it, glued it together, made sure it was all straight. There, it's all nice and straight. So that was it. And then hours and hours, hours of sanding and making sure that all the edges were good. So
I know with we're doing the countertop, mine I have bark on the edges, so you want to remove a lot of the bark, but you don't want to get carried away and otherwise it doesn't look like a live edge anymore. So I just use a brass wheel on a grinder and just rip off anything that's loose, because otherwise it could chip off later.
Right.
But the sanding goes on and on. But the other thing is, so I used a different finish. I used a hard wax finish, and that one only requires you to sand down to 180.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it bonds to the fibers of the wood, so it doesn't have a big thick finish, high gloss. It scares a lot of people because they're like, they think it's water's going to harm it. It's like, nope, it's fine.
Right. And here I squared up the edges, with my track saw and went ahead and cut them off so it was nice and straight.
Yeah.
I love my track saw. That thing is incredible. The table saw is just a place to work on now. You know, we rarely, unless we're ripping plywoods and stuff, we just don't even use it.
Well, I have a panel saw. I just drop the plywood in the panel and cross cut. I'm done.
Yeah. So their track saws got it all squared up, and I'm taking off all that extra bark.
There you go.
And what I used was a paint scraper just to scrape it down. I left a lot of the color in there so you could still tell that was the live edge, and then sanded it down with some 400 there just to kind of get an idea, and ended up doing both sides. So I also ended up blowing out all those holes, and then here we go back to some more sanding.
Right. Never done. Sanding's never done.
No, but I used 400 throughout the whole thing. And just to get it all down and nice and flat and straight. It worked out really well. Yeah.
But you didn't do progressive grits?
Yeah, I did. I was like, originally I did like 100, then I went to 150. And then I went
180, 220, 324.
Yeah.
And then, because you always want to wipe, or like I never use tack cloths because they have wax in them and they can mess with your finish.
Correct.
But yeah, always I'll do stuff like that, but always wipe or blow off or vacuum. I prefer to vacuum my pieces between, because then I can take, because if you got one little piece of sand that's from the 100, you can actually trash the whole thing when you're on 400.
Right.
Especially something that has pores and stuff. So.
And that's what I was doing. I just blew it off. I used the blower. So here I'm making these patches because some of those knots were all the way through. And you can't just put the plywood backing on there because the epoxy, when you pour it, will stick to it. So,
but it doesn't stick to Tyvek tape for some reason.
No, it does not stick to Tyvek tape. Well, you'll
see. You see, everybody uses Tyvek tape or tuck tape. They call it in Canada, to do their molds.
Right. Right. And I should have done the edges, but I went, oh, it'll be fine. They say to caulk.
Did you find out it's not going to be fine? Because
yes, I did.
Yeah, because usually you got to caulk them, seal them, whatever.
Right. Yep. And so here I use Stone Coat epoxy, and they have a fill coat, and then they have their top coat. So I mixed up the fill coat first. That way you can pour up to an inch thick at a time. The other ones you can't pour that thick. So, and then I just brushed it in all the cracks just to get it to set first.
Right.
And then I just started filling. And as air bubbles are in there, you'll see my torch coming in, and I'm just hitting it with a torch. And it's amazing how much air is in a piece of wood. As you pour this, it's like soaking in, and you just see the air bubbles keep coming up. Right.
And then for whatever, and the torch does a great job of causing those bubbles to burst and rise and clarify the epoxy. So it is good.
Right. And here I'm hitting some other spots where I knew I was going to end up with some air bubbles. So you can see the air bubbles popping in. The one thing I should have done here with this thicker coat was to apply a coat across the whole thing to get the color to be the same, because this thicker coat really brought out a different color in the walnut than the top coat did. So I can see it.
Typically you could do those fills, and then you take it to your buddy and he runs it on his CNC, and that's when you cut all the epoxy, everything off, and then sand it, then do your flood coat, your top coat.
Yep.
But how many of these you done?
So there I'm peeling the back off. You can see that Tyvek, the tape, it glued it all together. And it was amazing how thick that stuff was. So, and had I put on one coat and maybe just stopped and let that dry before I did a couple extra coats, it might have, come out a little bit better. But this was my first time trying it, and they said do a small piece first. So I figured, why not a 3 foot by 5 foot table? So there, I got it all sanded and cleaned up. This is the back side of it. And just sanded down. And there was that Tyvek tape would not come off. So I ended up just hitting it with 120 to knock it all down and get rid of it all. Right. And it says I think it's 30 days for it to cure completely. So my daughter's still afraid to use the table. So that's good. So, so after that, I did a quick coat on the back using a squeegee. And I just squeegeed it all out just so it would lay down. And I wanted to get a complete coat on the back.
Right.
And so as air bubbles were popping through, I just went ahead and kept hitting it and moving it back and forth. And then I just took off. When they tell you to mix a certain amount per square inch, it's very accurate. I didn't think it'd be enough. You can see I ended up having to just drag it off the side.
Yeah.
Onto a piece of paper just to get it out of the way. So.
And the epoxy is the stone coat. How long did that take to cure where you didn't have to sit there and babysit bubbles?
It was a couple hours. I was sitting there but I also did this over the winter. So it was really cold, which I realized I cranked the shop heat up to about 80 and it started working a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because my first original coat, it took over 24 hours for that to dry.
Sure.
And
so that's you sanding down the face side again.
Yep. So yeah, that was the top. I flipped it over, sanded it all down, and then I used the Scotch-Brite pad for a final sand and finish. And then there I just blew it all off. And you can see how it's all scuffed out and you don't think it's going to come back, but you put your next coat on and it really works out well. So then I did 3 coats of the finish coat. I did 3 layers before I did a flood coat. So by just doing a thin layer on here, you get the rest of those air bubbles out. And that way,
right.
Because when I poured this on, I came back the next day and there were still air bubbles everywhere. So I sanded them down, did it again, and I ended up doing 3 thin coats before I did a flood coat. And even on my flood coat, I was still getting air bubbles. But there you get an idea of what it starts to look like. And I just kept going back and forth with the squeegee, moving it around, hitting all the air bubbles with it.
So the one thing I'm curious about is, all these epoxies, like I made epoxy covered countertops years ago, and you weren't using you were lucky if you could find it in full quarts, or a gallon, even if you were lucky. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
So this has become so popular now. But what about the ambering? I mean, sunlight's going to make this thing go yellow, is it not?
Well, it claims that it won't, and this is sitting right by a window, so we'll find out over time. But they claim it won't be.
That was the sales guys.
Yeah, exactly. So what I was doing there with a brush is using the brush to dab it and hit it with the torch just to kind of bring out those air bubbles. And I guess the other thing,
you got to keep pulling the runs off the edges. You know what I mean? So the top's good. You don't want all those runs down the side because you can't really sand the sides too much.
Correct. So what would happen though? I'd get it all done. I'd get all the runs and the drips off the back. And I think, okay, it's not going to run anymore. Come back in the morning and it'd be drips all along the edges. So at one of these steps here, you'll see where I just took a paint scraper and scratched all those drips off all the way around the sides. So, all right. So then I did another light sand. Can you imagine the amount of sanding? That's what most of this is. And I'm blowing out all those air bubbles because there's still bubbles that are coming up after you get done. So I had all my 3 coats on. I leveled the table to make sure that it was right on the money.
Right.
And then again, when they tell you how much to use per square inch, they are right on. It's really amazing how accurate it worked.
Well, stuff's not real cheap either, so it's not something you really want to just waste. So that's nice.
I was surprised how I was expecting it to be more, I guess. And I think I've got 7.5 hours of footage of doing this, and it took longer than that. So, and this was all over probably a week and a half
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you can't just, it's not one day.
So you're putting a coat on, leaving, putting a coat on, leaving. And I don't know if can you see that cursor?
Yeah,
So right there on that end, that's where I just left that chip out of it and it got filled. So that all got filled with the epoxy, and then the knot over here where I'm working right now, same thing happened there.
yeah, so like I said, it's pretty common, guys will add the black dye or sparkles, for something that's really crazy. Because
Yeah.
you did the opposite, you did the live edge tabletop as opposed to a river table.
Correct. I could have taken those pieces, flipped them
Put them
in,
the other way, right, and done the river table.
right, flipped it over. See all those, now you can see all those edges there that I got to clean all the drips off.
Yeah.
And I kept going back and hitting it with a brush, making sure that I didn't have any. Come back in the morning and it'd be like that again. So,
Again, your tear temperature, if it was cold in there at that time,
yep,
it's not gonna set up, and you can't sit there all night, that's for sure. Because then you just end up with brush marks too.
correct.
So
So,
once it's fully cured, you can sand it, polish it, buff it, and get a hell of a gloss. Excuse me.
right, which is what I did. So then I just took the paint scraper and I would scrape that off every time. And then you can see how it's got like a little texture to it.
Yeah,
Just the way it wasn't laying down right. But then between coats, you would just hit it again. And there's a good shot. You can see right through the knot over here.
Yeah.
You can see down through there. And then as you sand, you can see how it's not flat, perfectly smooth. But once you do your flood coat, it comes out perfect. It's really amazing.
lots in sanding.
Yes. So, and then again, I was just using 400 all the way around. Just kept hitting it with 400, kept hitting it with 400. All right, let's see. This might be the flood coat here.
I would say so, judging from the paper you're putting everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, see, that was cold. So I was using a heat gun to actually warm it up a little bit more.
Mm.
And then you're using a 16th V-notch trowel. And that's what you spread it around with, and then it lays out. And that's what your flood coat's all about. And you can see it's got like a lot of air bubbles and stuff in it. Yeah, there's the notch trowel. You just kind of just keep pushing it all around.
Yeah, get it to where it's just like, when you're putting down a base of thin set, right? You just
Yep.
smear it all over, then get it on edge and just take off your excess. And
Yep. And as you're going over it with the trowel, you are popping a lot of those air bubbles because that's why it's milking. And then I brushed all the edges first.
well, again, this stuff does not set up in 10 minutes.
No, it doesn't.
So you have working time. You know what I mean? You don't have to freak out. You don't have to, go running so fast. Not sure why you're brushing it. Just popping bubbles.
Yep. So I just go through that with the brush, just popping it. And you can see then you hit it with the torch and it lays down again. And then I just as the bubbles, I was still getting air bubbles. That's why I was touching up around that one knot. But there, you can see how once you hit it with the brush, it pops a lot of those air bubbles, and then it starts to really start to clear up. I got nervous there because I didn't think it was going to clear up all the way, but there you can see how glassy it is. You can see all the junk on the shelves.
Right.
So that's how it ended up right there with that was finished. So then I found these legs from one of the guys they had. So I screwed these legs down. Yeah, I think you even got a pick. Yep, there we go. I'll do the sound effects for you. There. Okay. And there you go. Now we got the finished product. That's what it was. There's that one notched edge. the two pieces when I started. There's that knot. You can see the light fixture shining through there, but then
Right.
that's the table.
Beautiful.
All done. So I would probably say 2 weeks worth of time, you know, on and off. And in that, there's probably 15 hours, I would guess, total.
That's assuming you have access to a CNC. So
Yes.
that right there saves you a ton.
Oh, I can't imagine how, you know, had we not had that CNC machine to sit and level that out and do that with the rails, that would have taken hours. I spent probably an hour and a half in his shop and we were done. And,
Yeah.
so just a live edge table, like I said, something different, just showing you some of the things we do. And I think you've got some things like that too. You're going to start showing and shooting video of. So hopefully get you some more of these. If you like it, let us know. Leave a note down in the bottom, and I'll have the list of EBC cabinet solutions. The Stone Coat, I'll have a link for that, and then Horgan Forest Products. I'll put a link down there for that. So that way we can get all three of those. If you need to find anything, you'll know how to do it. And of course, send us a note if you have any questions. And with that, we'll say, keep it square and level.
Until next tornado.
Until next tornado.